the table here are, on my left, Willem Albert Bol from DPG Media, and on my right, Trix van der Vleuten from KFC Northern Europe, and they are just as excited and curious as we all are to hear the results of this year's annual brand growth study. In partnership with Adformatie, Marketing Week and Werben und Verkaufen, DVJ Insights questions over 450 marketers in Europe about their take on brand growth and on the role of creatives. And we welcome Lucas Hulsebos, CEO of DVJ Insights, in the studio with us, because you're here to share your results. We can't wait, so take it away.
Thank you, Tooske. This is a very special day for me, actually, because presenting after Mark Ritson and just before Les Binet and then being introduced by Tooske Ragas, I think this is the best day of my life.
The best is always in the middle.
Okay. What's the reason for... I try to go to the next slide, but what's the reason for doing this, actually? Because brand growth in the academic literature is basically gets a lot of attention, but is mostly dominated by all the work from the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute. And I think that Mark Ritson just showed that there's so much more to follow. There are people like himself, things around consumer behavior, branding, marketing. There's a lot of academic work, and we try to integrate all of that into one platform, not by only following one academic person, but by following a lot. But besides that, it's also important to ask practitioners how they see growth. And in order to understand that better, we do our brand growth research. And we do that brand growth research already for 4 years. And we do that now this year for the first time in 3 markets. Last year we did it in 2 markets. The years before only in 1 market. But overall, we interviewed already over 1,000 practitioners, over 1,000 marketers. And on top of that, we even interviewed 150 to 200 CMOs, more in a qualitative way. And that brought us a lot of different learnings. Learnings on different topics, and learnings, first of all, we see some trends. And trends, following the things people say over the years, show us exactly what people see. If they talk about growth, practitioners or marketers, they talk about that in a specific way. If you look at business-to-business marketers or business-to-consumer marketers, they all follow the business side. They look at market share, they look at sales. And if you would have asked that question 20 years ago, they probably would have answered awareness or something like other more marketing-related KPIs. But now what we see more and more, that marketing and the success of marketing is evaluated by sales, market share, conversion. And also, if you would have asked that 10 years ago, maybe NPS would have been mentioned quite a lot. And what we see is basically that the people or the companies that don't perform that well, they focus on NPS. The good performing companies, they focus on business-related KPIs like revenues and share. Another thing that we saw by doing brand growth over the years is around different themes. We have asked things around the growth drivers, innovation, the role of innovation, the importance of that. We had that theme last year, as Ronald already explained. Also, media plays an important role. And this year, it's all about creativity. The lessons that we learn, we do that by analyzing the data in a certain way. In order to understand what really drives marketing or companies really make different than others and how to grow, we do that by separating the data actually into 2 groups. We compare companies that do better than their direct peers with companies that do worse than their direct peers. And to make that very easy, we talk about winners and losers. And we see specific characteristics for winners versus losers, and I think that differentiates or tells you how to organize your marketing for growth. This year's theme was all about creativity. And if we ask about creativity, it's important to understand where creativity sits. A very interesting finding that we saw is that if marketing has a strong presence in the C-suite, those companies are doing much better than companies that have not. I think that's an interesting relation with creativity, because creativity maybe belongs to the marketing departments in companies. If we look at then what are the main drivers, more from a qualitative perspective, we see that creativity is not mentioned that much. We just saw 10 drivers. If we ask marketers directly, they say actually 3 main themes for driving growth. First of all, innovation. Innovation is a very important driver for growth. You have to innovate, and if you're not innovating, you will not grow. Also, consistency and vision are mentioned a lot. And basically also, if you look at the quant findings, that's also supported. And what you will see in my presentation is that I actually have a lot of slides and graphs where you see 2 bars, a green bar and a red bar. The green bar represents the winners, the red bar the losers, and the difference, the bigger it is, the more important that driver is. But consistency and innovation, or the support that that gets, is basically a big differentiator between winners and losers. Winners are more consistent and focus more on innovation. And if we then ask where creativity strategy or creativity is in that driver for growth, we see that it's mostly linked to the brand. Creativity to support the brand, and also there to make that very consistent and very focused on the DNA of a brand. Also what we saw, and that's a little bit related to the success of marketing, if we ask people what the success or creativity, how you could measure that, that's not by counting the number of awards. Creativity and the success of creativity is determined by sales, click ratios, engagement, more behavioral KPIs and KPIs that are related to the business. But the effect of creativity is also linked to media and media investments. If we ask people, do you see that creativity or the impact of creativity has decreased? We see that most people disagree with that, although there are more losers that say that there's an impact of creativity than the winners will do. Also what you see, and that was interesting related to previous presentation, the creatives have to be adjusted to the medium. And that's also, winners do that more than companies that don't perform that well. So there's also an important difference. But if you think about that, if you think about how creativity is linked to media, you also have to generate some learnings. In the presentation before, we looked at effectiveness. We actually looked at all the campaigns that we've measured, and we came up with an interesting finding. 50% of all the campaigns that we tested hardly had any impact at all. Only 50% of the campaigns had a small impact, and only 20% of all the campaigns had a minor impact. So it is quite hard to create an effect, and you need creativity to do that, and you need media to do that. But Les in a minute will tell us how to divide between brand building and sales activation. Actually, Mark already did. And basically, the basic rule there is invest more in brand building. But if you look at what marketers actually do, they invest more in sales activation, although there are so many learnings that you should do that the other way around. Also, if you look at continuous media investment, or burst or dribble, so in one go, a lot of media dollars, or just regular spread that across a year. At BYRON Sharp or the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, actually one of their main findings is you should not waste media euros by bursting. Only 26% of all the marketers agree with that. With all the other lessons, they agree much more, but with this one, then most people actually disagree. And I think that's interesting, because both have found and have used a lot of data to analyze how you should invest media, and we don't use that. We don't use that, we do it the other way around. We hardly apply the academic learnings to how we do and how we practice marketing. And if we look at the people or the marketers that follow marketing science much better, they're also much more successful than others. So one of the key findings is follow the things that have been demonstrated or proved by using a lot of data. And why does creativity not always realize its potential? We saw that a lot of campaigns were not good enough or did not create any impact. And if we look at where people get their inspiration, it's the most mentioned source of inspirations are internal brainstorms or ideas from other markets. And the ideas from other markets, we saw also that for innovation, very important, look beyond the boundaries of your country and actually see what's going on and what's good in other markets. That works quite well and is also used a lot. But listening to the consumers hardly being done, or listening by creative agencies even less. If we then look at the difference between winners and losers in asking feedback from consumers, we see that there's a big difference. We see that successful companies, they ask feedback from consumers much more often than companies that are not. Although overall, 50% of all marketers hardly use feedback from consumers. They just use their own gut feeling or experience, or they gamble with shareholders' money. So we've identified different stages for creative development, ranging from idea generation till evaluation afterwards. And we saw that research is only used or mostly used in the beginning of that process, when there's just an idea. At the moment advertising is ready, 3 out of 4 companies or 3 out of 4 marketers hardly ask any feedback from the consumers. Where if we look at the differences between winners and losers, we see that there, at the end, just before launching your campaign, you can gain the most. The difference between winners and losers is there almost 30% more success if you evaluate your advertising and ask feedback just before launching. And they also, those winners also have less excuses for not doing that. Of course, they mention timing, which can always be an issue, but they don't talk about budget, and even they don't talk about destroying or ruining the relationship with the creative agency. It's just a reason for asking feedback from consumers. And if we look at the results from a different perspective, we also see that there's quite a big difference between average and good performing ad that can go to 150 to 200 GRPs more with the same ad, but just having a better ad. Then the final thing is how creativity, or the way we use creativity, impacted by COVID-19. We see that most marketers say that they expect revenue decreases as a result of this crisis. They also think that that crisis will last for a longer time. So they think that there is definitely a way to decrease your marketing budget. But if you then ask, if you then bring that back to, if you then use that for creativity, what we see is that if we ask people, do they invest more or less in media, we see that the winners, they say that you have to continue investing in media. You don't stop with media, but you have to adjust your media to the actual current situation. Big differences between winners and losers in the way they use media and the way they allocate media. And which was also supported by the interviews that we had. Also in the interviews we saw that people said, if you want to win during a crisis, you have to invest. But the thing is, if you then ask, how should you change things, there were a lot of certain things. And what we saw in the beginning, that was also in the introduction already mentioned, a lot of creatives are adjusted to the corona situation. Sometimes the media, sometimes the message, but is that actually a good thing? And if we look at the differences between winners and losers, we saw that winners hardly adjusted their creatives, hardly adjusted the media they invested in, hardly changed their messages. They kept on believing in what they already were doing. They kept using it because it supported the memory structures we have. And for that reason, we also tested over 100 different ads to see if COVID-related ads actually did better. And we saw a massive difference between good and bad performing ads. And that actually ranged from 3% impact to 77% impact. A huge difference only realized by using the right or the wrong creative. So that's the importance of creative. It can go up to these kind of differences in terms of impact. So what does it all mean? What does this research brings us? And what we see if we talk about the topic creativity, that's very closely linked, of course, to marketing, which also shows that focus on consistency related to the vision is really important. The COVID results that we have shared also supported that. Make a consistent plan, have a consistent media strategy and creative strategy, and use that throughout the time. Don't adjust. And also evaluate creativity on the same KPIs as you do marketing. Because it's so closely, it should be evaluated on those same KPIs. We also learned that if you apply the lessons that Les will be sharing in a minute and that Mark shared, you will be much more successful. So my recommendation to everyone is follow those lessons. Read that literature and use it, because there's so much value in it. And finally, I think it's really important to ask consumers for feedback. We as professionals are hardly capable of evaluating our own advertising. You need a consumer for that. If you put something in an ad, you will always see it. A consumer does not. So these were the most important findings from our brand growth studio. I'd like to hand over to Tooske again.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you. That was a lot of information. Tix, Willem Albert. First reactions.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting to see actually also the shift within Corona and how it works, because sometimes from a marketing person, or it doesn't. It doesn't. No, especially the Corona context you gave of, yeah, you want to adjust because you want to be relevant in the time, can also be very boring. So I think that is something marketers, with the pressure of the business is going differently and consumers are asking for different things, but are they really asking for that, or are you just there because you're the brand they know and love?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting findings. Thanks for sharing.
What I see is that Mark and Lucas are saying a lot of the same things. And we love to make our job rocket science. And these results show it isn't. It's common sense. It's doing the right things on a consistent way. And I'm on a lot of stages and I do a lot of interviews. And sometimes we're just simply stupid because we want to do the funky, sexy stuff. And sometimes it's just don't do it. Stick to the plan, and I think these results show that the winners are the more consistent, the more normal companies, and the one who try to do the cool stuff, they lose.
Yeah, so this is a wake-up call.
Yeah,
like
I hope
your
so.
Your conscience or your common sense saying, okay,
but
don't lose yourself.
But I fear they don't want to hear it because it's not the popular message.
Right.
If one of the messages is, do your research, do your literature, follow scientists.
Yeah.
It's not so hard to do, but do we do it? No, we don't.
I think I saw a slide, do the work.
Yeah.
Right?
Work for it.
Work for it,
Yeah.
work for it.
I mean, listen to all the work that has been done. And do we really listen? Do we really take notice of all the research that has been done? Often we're just too simple and too lazy for it.
We don't. Let's go over a few things you mentioned, Lucas. Investing during a crisis seems to be the best strategy, but is that possible for everyone?
I think it is. I think you should always invest, especially in a crisis. You also have an opportunity, especially if you're a brand that really is a number 2 or a number 3, a challenger brand. I think you should invest because there will be opportunities that occur, and if your market leader is asleep, I think that is the best way to go and invest. And maybe you should do things smarter. Maybe you don't need a 30-second TV commercial, but you can do it in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But keep investing and keep making sure that people know you.
How scary that might be. Because
Yeah.
I can imagine, you know.
Yeah, I think it's scarier if you drop and then you need to reinvest to get at the same level again.
Yeah.
So yeah, investing
In
for
the long
growth
term.
on the longer term, I think that is the way to go.
Yeah.
The
Do you
problem
agree?
is that within our own community, we all agree. And we all say, yeah, of course. And we know it from history, way back to the 1930s on. I mean, we all know. But it's hard to convince your boss, your CFO, you need to invest. But if you want to lose, don't do it. I mean, it's very simple. Do you want to play offensive or do you want to become defensive?
But the people you need to convince can also read and can also check the history and can also.
Yes,
So
but
why?
their KPI is EBIT or result or profit this year. And you are talking about a multi-year game. So exactly like Mark said before, it's the game you want to play. And if it's the blame, if the game is market share or profit this month, that's a different game than becoming the winner within a few years.
Yeah.
So that's to do with scope.
I tend to disagree because if you look at the marketing research that's been done and all the research that's showing that you actually need to invest, the people who decide whether or not you get the budget are the ones that actually look at those stats as well. So if you can...
Does the CFO really?
I think you can convince them, and you should as a marketer.
Then you're the right sort that does that. And there's a lot of marketeers that don't have the power to just say to their CEO, we're not going to do that. We're not going to decrease our budget.
Yeah,
Go to your CFO and say, you're wrong. Yes, there's COVID. Yes, we have less revenue, but we're still going to invest in marketing. You have to be really tough and really convincing to do so. And apparently you are, but a lot of your colleagues are not.
Yeah, but I think it is an invitation, right? Because there is a lot to gain.
Yeah, and I think there's an important thing also mentioned by Mark, and that's that short-term perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have that short-term perspective, and during a crisis, especially in certain categories, you don't see any results from your advertising or your efforts.
No.
So the moment you don't see that results, we panic and we do the things you actually should not do. We've learned that, we know that, but the moment you see, hey, we're doing so much stuff, but we hardly see it in the results, and that's the moment where I think winners separate themselves from the losers because they panic and they drive into the sales activation mode, which doesn't work,
So
especially
this digital congress should be broadcasted towards every CEO and every CFO out there.
And you need to convince
marketers,
somebody, use these studies.
You know, no, I mean, it's really that simple because too often we talk to amongst each other and we really agree. We're not stupid, we use common sense, we know the data. But it's so hard if your focus of your company is so short term. And it's easy for me. I mean, I work at a family-owned business. DPG Media is family-owned. So my family, our owners, are not looking at results of this quarter, not even this year. They're looking, can we pass on this company to our next generation?
Yeah.
They have a different focus from a company which is at the stock exchange with really bad indexes, and they go like, oh my God! And they're in panic because they need to adjust what's happening right now, today.
Very understandably.
So I can understand it, but it's so not smart to do.
Yeah. All right, so that's big yes, invest. The study shows a few interesting differences between winners and losers when it comes to adjusting advertising to the current crisis. So we're going to invest, but how? All right. Losers, you said, Lucas, adapt the medium in which they advertise. Losers also adjust their message more often. Winners mainly adjust the commitment and invest more.
Well, I tend to disagree on the medium, and we just had a... Because, well, when everybody was in lockdown, I don't think it makes sense to put a big out-of-home there. Maybe in city centers where people just were walking for the first time in their lives. But on the other hand, I do believe that media and also the creativity you create for it really should lean on the media and get the creativity out there. So my question to you is, how does it work with out-of-home or subway advertising or stuff where people just weren't there for that moment in time?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I think what is important here is that the basic idea behind these findings is if you have developed a creative and media strategy, stick to it. Because there was a plan behind it and you have to follow it. It's the same, there are certain reasons for doing it, there are memory structures, they're not changed overnight. They take a long time to change. That's also why Mark says only big brands can win. That's because they have big memory structures, they have big positions in people's brains. And that's here the same. If you have created a certain strategy, media and creative, and of course there are differences, but that's more tweaking, but believe in the idea you had and keep on doing it. The crisis will not change that overnight. That's more the idea behind the results.
Okay, thanks.
What I don't believe is to really adjust your course as a company or as a brand during a crisis. But what I really did like is that a few companies gave very, nice, interesting messaging like we're supporting you, but in a good way. So, for example, there was this health insurance company which kind of linked to COVID. for me, that's logical.
Yeah.
I found it very sensible. You saw a lot of supermarkets going like, hey, these are the rules if you enter our supermarket. That I get. That's for me logical. If you're a car brand, you didn't need to change your creatives for COVID. There was no logical link. So I think like 80%, if you sell chips, they were the same chips before and after COVID.
And I'm not from this, what's the word? Right. This is not
You're
my
a
field.
consumer.
I'm a
We do it for
consumer.
you. We do it for you.
I'm a consumer. And sometimes it just annoyed me, and I thought, okay, now you are trying to make extra money over the backs
It's
of
too
people
pushy.
who get sick.
Yeah.
It's way too pushy, and I thought it was actually a little offensive.
No, but the thing is, marketing, people are just people. And it was very emotional also for them. They were, so
Yeah.
everybody was like, oh, we need to do something. No, you didn't. I mean, no. I mean, I really get these people, they feel it, and everybody was talking about it. It was at work, you were at home, your kids. So at some point, your creative agency comes, we need to do something. And I kind of get it that you
We need to
have this
show that we
urge.
care.
Show them, do it. So I get the reflex. But then at that point, you hopefully have some sensibility where you go, is this really necessary for me, for my brand, in my category? And then mostly, I think 70, 80% don't do it. Maybe just make one nice gesture on your social, do a nice ad, for example, in one of our newspapers. I mean, the logical things, but just a gesture. Don't change your course. Don't change your brand campaign. Don't go and change your messaging. Just show them that you care. That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you really can nail it, it really can help. So,
Of course.
So we did our
In the right-
finger licking good campaign, right? And scratching out the fingers because you're not allowed to lick your fingers when it's Corona times. And it was.
But is it the
it
rule
was
or
a
the
hit.
exception to the rule?
No, it was an exception. But if you have real cool creatives, I do believe that it can help because then it's fun and it's
if you make it
entertainment.
logical, yes.
And
Instead of-
big do you make it? If you have it like a gentle twist with a nice idea and
Yeah, but it
slightly
starts with the
focused and
brand.
targeted
Yeah.
and on the brand, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you really change the course, your story isn't different, your brand isn't different. Don't change your course. Just show you care.
Yeah.
So you have a heart.
I think you all agree. Okay.
But that's boring.
Yeah, well, she'll say something in a minute, and then you can fight again. The main inspiration sources for creatives, internal brainstorms and other markets. Those were the two most important ones, right?
Yes.
Do you agree?
I like it in the sense that I hate if I talk to people and they say, oh, I'm not creative, I need to go outside. If you look at your own company, your own team, I really like the fact that people say, I also go internal. I understand that the losers maybe say it more often than the winners, but I like the fact that you don't need to go outside. But often, if you go internal, if you really look at execution, you don't get a 9 or a 10, you get a 6. So the idea making, the insights, the direction you need to do yourself, but at some point it is a job, needs to be done very well.
Right.
Go to the professionals. Because you sometimes see if internals do the execution, it's kind of bad. So don't do that. I mean, go to the pros to do that. For example, TV sounds very easy profession. Doing presenting jobs sounds pretty easy. Then do it.
Try it yourself.
Try it yourself. It is pretty hard. Go to the pros. So that's the same with execution. But if you look at really idea making, concepting beforehand, insights, do it yourself, and then at the right moment get external power. And I also loved the other one, Lucas, where you said go to other markets, other countries, other industries. For example, you're in the fast food business. Hey, what are supermarkets doing? Hey, that's kind of smart. Let's give it a spin. So I love that you steal. Salvador Dali once said, creativity is hiding your sources. So just steal wherever, whenever.
Yeah, I think if it's a good idea, you should go out and get it. But also looking at the people you hire, if they're a diverse team, because other markets could also be new hires that just look different to your business and say, hey, why are you doing the things you're always doing that way? Because I think that is really helpful. So for me, internal brainstorms we do, but I like to start from the outside in because the outside is really where the growth comes in from.
But brainstorms are very hard. I mean, this is the word I hate the most. If I see in my agenda the word brainstorm, I usually know it's going to be bullshit hour of a lot of stupid stuff. Hardly ever brainstorms are done correctly. So often it's like people and their egos just shouting their ideas, which has nothing to do with brainstorm, because brainstorm is literally having a very diverse set of people and kind of getting really odd and curious. And at some point you come somewhere where you go, whoa, never expected that. And that hardly ever happens. It's
Maybe Lucas can tell us what a proper brainstorm looks like.
No, well, that's also an interesting question. But I wanted to say something different, because what I thought was, when I looked at the results, also the source where creativity comes from, that can differ a lot, and there's lots of different ways. Where it actually goes wrong is when you ask for feedback. Because if you believe that from an internal perspective you know it all, then you're in the wrong direction. And that's, I think, the most important difference is also there. So the source is not that important, but ask for feedback, because that feedback will help you one step further.
It has to do also with the arrogance. If you kind of say, we know it all, we kind of know what the consumer is going to like. No, you don't. Ask them. And probably they won't know it. But that's fine. You can still go ahead with your plan if people don't get it. But then you realize, hey, it's going to be a stretch because we strongly believe in this creative direction.
Yeah.
Hey, the audience finds it hard. Let's wait and see. And then at some point you can also measure again. Hey, now they have it. So I don't believe that the audience should kind of decide your course, but it's always wise to test it, to see it, to track it. And then at some point they need to get it, because you're doing it for you. Huh? We're doing it for you, for the consumer.
Eventually I need to get it.
Yeah, if you don't get it, no, it's quite funny. Sometimes I sit next to my beautiful wife and we're watching TV, and she is a doctor, not stupid, and I'm laughing at a commercial, whatever, and she goes like, I don't get it.
I don't get it.
And she's not stupid, huh? But because it's an internal joke. We marketing kind of people, advertising, we get it. And she goes like, huh, but just now they were there, and now they're there, but why is Tooske now with Bastiaan on a bike, on Stella? I don't get it. And then I explain it, hey, they are like a metaphor for...
And then she got it.
No. And
now she gets it.
And then often she still doesn't get it. So, and Stella is quite easy to understand, but sometimes commercials and creatives are so hard to grasp for a consumer, because we love it, all the metaphors.
Yeah, you also spend a lot of time on it, so you actually know all the creative and...
You're blind for it.
Of course, so keep your eyes and your ears open. We have to end it here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you. That was fun, and that was good. That was informative.